This is the School Success Podcast, a podcast for school leaders to learn from other school leaders what's working and what's not, and to get inspiration and encouragement, as well as strategies to grow school enrollment, connect with families, retain teachers, recruit teachers, and everything in between. You guys are heroes, and I cannot thank you enough for pouring into this next generation that's coming behind us. My goal is you will take at least one thing away from every episode that you can take back to your school to make it better than it is right now. Please enjoy the School Success Podcast.
Time for school.
Hey, School Success Makers. Today we're joined by my new friend Terry Neven out of Los Angeles, California, and he is doing a type of school that is very near and dear to my heart, homeschooling. Those that don't know, I was homeschooled my entire life. My mom is a rock star. I'm one of 4 boys, and she homeschooled all of us, which I don't know how she did it, but she did it. She's awesome. And Terry and his school, Sunland Christian School, that's what they're doing there in Los Angeles. And we dive into all things homeschooling and what they're doing there. So enjoy this next episode of the School Success Podcast. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the School Success Podcast. I'm your host, Mitchell Slater, joined by a new friend out of Los Angeles, California, Terry Neven, who is the principal of Sunland Christian School, which is a homeschool Christian school there in beautiful Los Angeles, California. And homeschool, those that have heard some of these episodes and heard me talk before, are very near and dear to my heart. I was homeschooled my entire life, so I'm super stoked to hear from Terry and what they're doing and things that they have done in the homeschooling world there in California. But I don't want to take any thunder away from him. I'm going to pass it off to him to introduce himself. So Terry, welcome to the podcast, sir.
Thank you, Mitchell. It's an honor, and I'm glad to be sharing with you and the audience a little bit of our experience with homeschooling. We actually began homeschooling back in the day when Raymond and Dorothy Moore were on Dr. James Dobson's radio broadcast. I know James Dobson, and I emceed for him on a weekend with homeschooling families. And then Dr. Raymond Moore and his wife Dorothy and I became friends. And from there I learned a lot about homeschooling for my own children. And then in 1986 we started Sunland Christian School because where I lived there were hundreds of families beginning to homeschool, and they needed somebody with administrative skills to kind of pull things together and deal with issues that are peripheral around administration and record keeping, etc. So that's how I got started doing that. I did that while I was also the senior pastor of a church. So it kind of worked well together, hand in hand.
Man, that's a lot of things you're juggling. And I know when we talked before we started, when we talked earlier this week before we did the actual podcast recording, you got I know your kids were homeschooled. You got lots of kids. You got lots of grandkids. I'd love to know a little bit more about you personally and how you got to where you are and your family and what you like to do for fun and all of that.
Well, first off, what I like to do for fun, which I don't do as much as I would like to, is that is play basketball. I do have a son that lives locally nearby, and we attempt to play basketball a couple times a month. But life's been a little bit busy, and it's kept me from doing that. But I also like to read. I like to square dance with my wife. We've been doing that for about 4 years, although the pandemic kind of put the kibosh on it for a little while. But we just started back up. A couple local square dance clubs have started, and we're currently dancing at least once or twice a week. And it's a lot of fun exercise. Great opportunity for socializing, and we enjoy that, along with loving our kids, loving our grandkids. We have 7 children between us, and we have 13 grandchildren. A good majority of them live within a 20-minute radius of us here in Los Angeles, but some of them do live outside of the area as well.
Super awesome. And I have actually always wanted to try square dancing. I think that'd be a blast to do. I've seen videos of it and pictures of it. I'm always like, that looks like a fun time. And I'm a very extroverted, outgoing person. So that would fit, I feel like, my personality. My wife I don't know. I might have to really do some coaxing to get her involved with some square dancing, but it does sound like a good time.
Once she would have an opportunity starting with a real simple class and meeting other people, young couples around the age of you guys, it takes on a different nature than just thinking about square dancing. And it's really good for your mind and your brain because you're remembering calls and then you're having fun dancing together with a bunch of other people. So it can be a lot of fun. And she could always call my wife and my wife will tell her all about the fun that she has. Maybe that'll help.
There we go. All right. Well, jumping into the school. I know you and I did a little bit of talking earlier this week about it, but I'd love to hear more about Sunland and what you guys are about, and specifically, because my first question I typically ask the guests is some challenges you guys are up against as a school and how you're combating those. So let's dive into Sunland, a little bit about you guys as a school, and then those challenges you guys are up against.
All right. Well, we began by my family beginning to homeschool our children when my oldest daughter, who's now 45, was only about 6 years old, and we decided that we wanted to go ahead and homeschool because we had heard Dr. Raymond Moore on James Dobson's radio broadcast talk about homeschooling. And one of his phrases that he used as a title of one of his books was "better late than early," which talks about the fact that children do well academically if they aren't thrust into an overt, organized learning setting at a younger age. The average child begins to experience burnout by the time they're 10 years old. So we started to homeschool our children. Other people around us, because I was pastoring a church at the time, they asked us about it and they started homeschooling their children as well. And then Sunland began in 1986 and we started organizing what we were doing. One of the first challenges that we faced was one day an official from the Los Angeles Unified School District came to my office because we had filed an affidavit, and she literally came to my office to tell me that what I was doing was illegal. So a lot of homeschoolers have faced questions about the legality as well as questions about socialization for homeschool kids. But on the issue of legality, when this lady told me that what we were doing was illegal, the interesting thing is she all of a sudden had some sort of a health attack there in my office. And I was very empathetic. I, asked what she needed. I prayed with her. And by the time she got over this attack, she then turned to me and she says, "You know what, Terry, after listening to what you do, I want to apologize for coming in the way I did. It sounds like what you're doing is great. If there's anything we can do to help you, then please feel free to reach out to us." So we continued to develop Sunland Christian School. We began to grow rapidly. So we began to discover the things that we needed to do as a private school to assist homeschoolers, because there's a couple things that are a little bit different than your average private campus school. We don't have all the children in our presence that we're responsible for, or have to have regulations, fire codes, and building codes and things of that sort. But we needed to maintain issues about school records. And so I began to find that the administrators from LA County Department of Education and LA Unified were very helpful to us. But there came a time in 2006 where one of the families in our school became involved in family services through issues that happened to that family. And they began to be concerned about this child being homeschooled. It did end up turning into a court case in the state of California. It went to the California Appellate Court, and the issue began to focus around whether or not homeschooling children privately was legal in the state of California. And up to that point, it was very ambiguous as to whether or not it was legal. There had been very few cases that actually ended up in court where families were charged. So this court case at the appellate level would set a precedent for the state of California. When the case was over, the three judges, as they were getting ready to declare their findings, told us that this was the most interesting case they had handled in their career. Well, that was kind of impressive to hear, but when they concluded with their ruling, it made private homeschooling in the state of California legal for the very first time. And that now families could homeschool through a private school like Sunland. They could also file their own affidavit, or they can continue to homeschool through a public independent study program or a public charter school. This, of course, had implications throughout the United States as other states watched this appellate court case, and many of them began to follow suit. As we know, homeschooling is legal in all 50 states. But I want to encourage any homeschool administrator not to be afraid of public school officials or the law, but just know in your heart that what you're doing in trying to help families teach their own children at home is a valid thing to do, and with maybe some help from others, if you're facing any challenges, you can be encouraged and nurtured through whatever challenges you face. So we went through a number of fairly good-sized challenges. We work with kids that are in the movie industry. We work with kids that are in the music industry. We work with families that have special needs children. I have a daughter who is now 34, and she was homeschooled all of her life, with the exception of a few years in public school for special needs children. But she was getting sick at the school from the other children, so that's when we decided that we're going to continue to teach her at home. So she's now 34 years old, so I've had all of those decades in working with special needs children, whether they're blind or deaf, have severe learning disabilities, and that has given Sunland a leg up on being able to help families who teach their own children at home. So that's kind of a foundation, Mitchell, of how we got started and some of the things that we went through to learn and gain the experience that we now have in order to serve families throughout the United States. We do have some students in foreign countries, but there's a lot of administrative issues that does make foreign countries a more difficult scenario. If a student graduates from Sunland and they want to go to a university in a foreign country, they have to go through what's called an apostille. You know, it has a price to it and it has time, but we still do serve some families outside of the United States.
Well, you guys are serving obviously a great need that's there, and you guys have been doing this for a while, so I would almost consider you guys, you're experts in this. You guys brought homeschooling to the state of California and made sure that people had access to that. So I love what you're doing, and I want to encourage you guys to continue, of course, doing what you're doing. Would you say, before we get into the next question I have, any other specific challenges you want to share before we jump into the next part that you guys are kind of maybe constantly up against that you're and how you're specifically combating those?
Well, I think that from an administrative point of view, in relationship to the legalities or as an organization dealing with society, we don't have as many challenges there. I think the bigger challenge that we face as a homeschool program is either encouraging parents that they can do it, because some come to us, they're very afraid that they're going to mess up their children's learning style, how to not be a helicopter mom, but at the same time hold their children accountable. That's probably what I would classify as the area that takes most of our time and is the greatest challenge. Some parents seem to be able to quickly grow in confidence. Give them about 2 weeks to about a month worth of teaching their own kids at home, and we tell them, you can call us as often as you want. You're not going to bother us. We would rather that you call us and get your answers than for one of your children to call us and let us know that you're in a fetal position in the corner and that we have to somehow talk you off the edge of the cliff there. So give the average parent with support about a month. They seem to gain confidence. There are some, though, that maybe can't make it over that hump, and they may pull out after a couple months because it's too overwhelming for them. Sometimes it might be because the children have challenges that the parents haven't dug into to resolve. And I think one of the most valuable skills about homeschooling is that it gives parents the greatest opportunity to get to know their children and try to find out what works with them, which really is what parenting should be. But today, of course, we've left things to others to do those things for us sometimes.
I know we had also talked about this too. I'd love to kind of jump into the funding side of things for you guys. I know we talked, you guys charge, a very, very small monthly fee for them to be a part of the school. Well, you take all the other schools in California. They're of course getting funding from the state based on each kid that enrolls in their school, and based on how many days they've attended the school and all these things. And we have a few homeschool school clients that we work with, and they are technically a public homeschool, so they also get funding based on the kids that are enrolled in their school. But I know you guys are set up a little different, so my question is, how does that work? How do you guys, obviously, you pay your bills so people can hear that, as well as where does that funding go that, the state of California, if this, let's say Timmy and Tommy were going to go to your school, state of California, they're not paying your school that money, but if Timmy and Tommy went to the public school next door, they're going to be forking out that money every year for that school. So where does that money kind of go, and how does the state of California kind of manage that?
Well, if a family is homeschooling through a private homeschool program that's charging them fees, and it's not a public charter program that gets money from the state, what the state does is the money that is being paid by families in the state of California through their property tax for the public school, if those kids went, it just continues to go into a pool that the state of California uses to run the public schools. So there's no financial advantage for families to homeschool privately in the sense of a tax rebate or a lowered tax. They don't get any money from the state of California because they've chosen to do that. In the scenario that they might enroll in a private homeschool program like ours, families do pay us a registration fee. They do pay us a monthly tuition, and then the families are responsible for paying the price for purchasing curriculum. Now, other private homeschool programs might build in the cost of curriculum into their monthly fees, and that's another strategy that a school can do. In our case, we feel like we're not here to make profit off of the selling of books, because really it doesn't occur that frequently, just once a year. In many of our returning families, they already know what they're going to use. They already buy it in advance, so they don't even end up buying it through us. And there are hundreds of publishers that will sell viable curriculum to homeschoolers. And most of those publishers have built their curriculum around the general course content and course outlines that are general to all the states in the United States. So you can go to a major publisher like Abeka, Bob Jones, Alpha Omega, School of Tomorrow, Christian Liberty, etc., and you can buy great appropriate curriculum for your child. Now, parents can buy it either directly from the publishers, so that means that the families are spending less money. A textbook through the public school system might, for one topic, run about $250 to $500 for that topic. Well, you can buy homeschool curriculum for all four major topics of English, math, history, and science for the full year for as low as about $400. So basically you're spending about $100 a topic for a full year of curriculum. So there's a little bit of savings. If a family sends their child to a private school, they're probably paying much more than that for the books that their child is using at that private school versus if they do it through homeschooling. And some homeschool programs may have a little bit greater price. Some may have a lesser price. I think we're kind of middle of the road. Families do pay for their own field trips if they go on them. We do require testing once a year. There is a small fee for that. But for the most part, families who do teach their own children at home are not always doing it because of an economic reason. It's not that they're trying to get money from the public school or that they're really trying to save money, unless they're trying to save what they would pay a private school and choose to homeschool. Yes, they will save money that way. Some families might pay the equal amount per month at a private school that they end up spending for one whole year with us. So there is an economic factor, but I don't find a high percentage of people homeschool for the economic factor. They're really homeschooling because they're concerned about their children's character development, they're concerned about their moral values, and they're concerned about making sure that their children are focusing in on their academics like they should.
And I also have heard this before for this, I think, and obviously please correct me if I'm wrong, the state of California, do they offer an allotment for homeschool families? Because I know we have the clients we work with in the homeschool world that their students get an allotment from the state to spend on different school supplies from them. So is that a thing in California? Because I've heard that it maybe used to be. Is that something that your families involved in your school can take advantage of?
The families involved in my private school or any other private homeschool program, those funds are not available to them. The only way those funds are available to them is if they are enrolled in a public homeschool program, and then those funds are available. The difference, of course, is with the public homeschool program, you can't use Christian curriculum. You are relegated to use whatever secular curriculum that public homeschool program uses. You are then allotted funds for school supplies, etc. So another reason families might choose a private homeschool program is they then get to pick the curriculum, because many of them may be wanting to pick Christian curriculum versus secular curriculum.
Okay. Makes complete sense. And perfect segue into my next section I love talking about and bringing up. This is where you get to brag about your school. I know you've been doing this a while, so share any stories you want, but things that you guys are just doing awesome that you'd love to share with the community that's listening.
Mitchell, I think that there is so much value in helping parents teach their own children at home. The stories that I hear that are just so heartwarming are just fantastic. One of our fun stories to tell is we had a young lady who was homeschooled through our program starting in the 8th grade. Her parents knew that she was capable of handling some college courses. So she began to take college courses at the 8th grade level while doing the rest of her courses at home through homeschool curriculum. She continued that process, and when she began her high school years, she began taking more courses through the public community college. We can use those credits here through Sunland towards earning their diploma. So one semester of a college level course is equal to one full year of high school credit. So with that strategy in mind, by the time this young lady turned 16 years old, the week that I handed her a diploma in which she graduated earlier, she also was handed her AA degree from the local community college in the very same week. So those are kind of fun stories to hear about. There are other students who will enjoy, of course here in California, being able to be on movie sets or television series or things of that sort, because they're able to homeschool while they are working on the set. Now, a child actor on a normal set anywhere in the world, or at least in the United States, is required to have 3 hours of instruction on the set per day. So there's that 3-hour block of time. Now, if they're not homeschooled, then the set teacher is relegated to know where that child is and come up with a curriculum for them. If they're homeschooled, then the parents can bring that curriculum, and then it's the teacher's job just to supervise that the child is getting their work done. So there are some caveats to homeschooling, even for families who have their kids in the music or the movie industry. But one of the stories that I hear from students sometimes is they will tell me, Mr. Neven, I have learned more in the last month here at home than I did all last year at public school. Now that's interesting because they're not complaining. They're actually very pleased that they realized that they weren't learning and that they're enjoying the learning process. Of course, there are many reasons socially why parents homeschool their kids, and in many cases we have kids who call us, ask about our program because they want to talk their parents into letting them be homeschooled because they don't like the bullying that goes on, or they don't like the lack of attention that they don't get from, or the lack of attention they get from the teacher when they need more help in their schoolwork. So some of the social reasons, I'll hear stories from kids and the parents who say the kids have really relaxed and really begun to blossom and bloom in their personality because they don't have all the social pressure on them that they were having in public and in some cases private school settings. So, you know, those are some of the greatest stories. And when I have, like this week, I received a phone call from one of our students who graduated back in 2015. He now needs an official diploma because he's going for his doctorate in the medical field. And he tells me how thankful he is that he was able to homeschool and that it set a foundation for his study process and that it allowed him the luxury of going on to study to be a doctor. Those stories are just heartwarming to us, and we live for those stories.
I love it, and it makes it everything worthwhile what you guys are doing to hear stories like that. So I knew you'd have some good ones, so I appreciate you sharing those with me. As I we slowly wrap things up, I got one kind of major final question that I ask every guest, and I would love for you to share, and you've been doing this a long time, so I know you probably got some good tidbits to share, but what would be that one piece of advice, if you could put it into one piece of advice that you'd share with any of the school leaders that are listening?
I think one of the strengths that a school administrator can develop and utilize in their process of working with families is that emotional connection with the family. Being able to, at the moment you might be sit down with the family and close your office door. When you close that door physically, being able to close off all the administrative responsibilities, close off your concerns about record keeping, and being able to connect with that family about their children, connect with that child so that they feel the authenticity of your concern for them, and that the questions you ask them help them to actually develop maybe a greater understanding about themselves or their child, and try to find ways to put the learning process into perspective, not necessarily in a school setting, but in an individualized learning setting, trying to unravel the layers that keep that child from being as successful as they could be. And there's a skill to being able to do that so that the child feels like you're not just dissecting them, but that you're actually caring about them and that you want them to succeed, but you want to dialogue over what may be the difficulties that they're facing, and not just casually throw them into some sort of well, you've got a learning disability, so we need to do some special ed things. You know, not resolving everything with an administrative answer, but a personal answer, even if it means that you will be following up with some administrative strategies or programs that are available.
I love it. I love it. Terry, I just want to do a huge shout out for you. You've been pouring into kids and families in the state of California and probably even technically beyond because of where all those kids have gone. And that I just want to do a huge thank you to that. You've poured many of your years of your life into educating students in that next generation. And so thank you for that. Thank you for pouring into all these future kids that are coming behind them. And I wish you and Sunland and everything you guys are doing nothing but the best. And I just really appreciate you giving of your time to be on the podcast today. Thank you so much, Terry.
Well, Mitchell, I want to do a shout out to you. Thank you for what you're doing because you're endeavoring to help school administrators and schools to be more effective, because that is really where the rubber meets the road in trying to help provide an education to children. And I know you have a variety of other resources for school administrators, not just the information that comes through on this podcast, but also other resources that can help them in marketing their school, in helping them with their website, things of that sort that take a lot of the burden off of the principal or the administration of the school so that they can focus on what really works. So hats off to you for what you do as well.
Thank you so much. That really does mean a lot. Well, another huge shout out and a thank you to Terry for taking time to be on the podcast today. He's been doing schooling and educating for a long time and has given a lot to California and the community there in Los Angeles. So I just want to give another huge shout out to Terry. Thank you for all you're doing to pour into that next generation that's coming behind us. And as usual, guys, I'm hoping you can take at least one thing away from today's interview, take it back to your school to make it better than it is right now. And that can go for any of these episodes. It could be somebody who's with a charter school, a public school, a private school, a homeschool. There's things that we can learn from others who are doing things that maybe we never thought of before. And that is my vision. That is my goal for this podcast. So I'm hoping you guys learn at least one thing today. And maybe you are struggling to grow your school's enrollment and be able to connect better with your families with technology. We'd love to hear from you and help you do that. You can find us online, schoolsuccessmakers.com. That's schoolsuccessmakers.com. Or please join our free Facebook community just for school leaders. It's called School Success Makers, and it's on Facebook. So please put in a request. We'd love to see you in there. And we'll be here next week with another awesome guest on the School Success Podcast. We'll see you then.